Okay, thanks everyone for turning up. Welcome to the Save Cliefden Caves Public Forum, jointly hosted by the Save Cliefden Caves Association and the the Nature Conservation Council of New South Wales. The Save Cliefden Caves Association is a volunteer-led movement with over 5,000 supporters. Yesterday we ticked over 5,000 people who signed the petition supporting the Saving the Cliefden Caves. So we've reached a couple of great milestones. Our aim is to raise public awareness of the threat to the Cliefden Caves and to build a momentum of a movement of people opposed to any dam that would impact on them.
Thank you very much, Tim, for that introduction. And could I give you all a heartfelt thanks for being here this evening? It may seem like a small thing to come here for an hour or so and discuss an issue like this, but I'm well and truly aware how busy many of us are. And I'm also aware that nothing ever changes unless really good people stand up and give a little bit of their time to do things that are important, like preserve these caves. Caves are the nearest things that we have to time machines. The conditions in caves often preserve material for an extraordinarily long period of time and preserve evidence of past environments and past organisms that have now vanished. I guess the thing most of us think about if we think about caves and what they might contain is bones, yeah? And it's true, you find a lot of bones in caves, and those deposits of bones can tell us a huge amount about past environments. But the sort of paleontology that's represented by bones is now becoming kind of old school. People do a lot more with caves and cave sediments now that reveal much deeper aspects of our prehistory than you could ever imagine doing just 10 years ago. One discovery that was published just this year was the discovery of ancient DNA preserved in bones in caves in Tasmania, and this is DNA of Australia's megafauna. So these are species of giant marsupials that went extinct 40,000 years ago. Until this year, no one had ever recovered any DNA from them. We thought it was a hopeless case because they went extinct so long ago, and DNA is quite a fragile molecule. But certain caves in Tasmania have kept temperatures low and have had just the right humidity to preserve the DNA of extinct giant kangaroos for 40,000 years. This is a new discovery. So as people start looking at caves around the country, who knows what they're going to discover. Of course, caves are also hugely important to Indigenous people. They're where art was created, where camps were made, where burials were sometimes made as well. And for that reason, there is going to be a wealth of information in many cave systems around Australia documenting the lives of people who we can't reach in any other way, really. The only evidence they've left is what's been left in those cave systems, and they need to be respected and researched and investigated so we can better understand the people who trod this land before we ever did. Caves are also repositories of living things that represent past environments. When I was director of the South Australian Museum, we had a team of researchers that went to Western Australia at the behest of a mining company and investigated caves, and these were water-filled caves, way out in the northwest of WA in a limestone area. And basically they had to break through the limestone, take a water sample and then analyse it. What they found was living invertebrates in those ancient subterranean waters. These are blind, pink, pigmentless organisms, little beetles and crustaceans and so forth, whose nearest relatives live today in the rainforests of southern Chile in South America. So they'd survived for 50 million years in these aquifers, these caves with water in them up in the northwest of WA, with no representation left on the land surface. So all of their relatives that must have lived in the ancient rainforests of Western Australia or even Queensland have all gone, leaving only these cave organisms. So to me, caves are time machines. They're things that are the most precious, one of the most precious paleontological assets that we have. And we're just beginning to explore them. I was at the University of Wollongong again today with some colleagues who were talking about new techniques to really examine how the sediments accumulate in caves. We used to just take the sediment and break it apart and try to date individual sand grains and so forth. Now people think they can take a slice of the sedimentary profile, look at each individual sand grain on that using new sophisticated techniques and other chemical techniques, and reconstruct what happened in that cave over time, what sort of animals came and burrowed into the cave surface, who lived there and perhaps built a campfire or hunted or whatever they did. So we're slowly beginning to unlock a much greater potential for caves to tell us about our past. How might all of that benefit a local community? All around Australia now we're trying to protect our remaining biodiversity and even restore some biodiversity that's since vanished. I don't think any of us here are strangers to the fact that over the last 200 years we've lost huge numbers of species from right around the continent as a result of changed fire regimes, introduction of foxes and cats and rabbits, and the clearance of forests. I also work with a group called the Australian Wildlife Conservancy. They're just one organisation who are trying to restore the animals to those areas. How do we know what lived there before? You only find out through caves quite often. That's the only source of evidence beyond a few very cursory notes perhaps in an old explorer's diary. But the real detail is in the uppermost levels of caves where we find the bones of creatures that actually lived there in the past. Those restored areas that are springing up around Australia are becoming great natural assets. You can see them now around the country. There's one up in the Kimberley that I'll be visiting later in the year called Mornington Station. It's a major tourist drawcard now. The kind of places that John Wamsley set up in South Australia and Western New South Wales also are very valuable to those local communities. So to me, there's a lot of reasons why you might want to preserve caves, especially caves we know next to nothing about. It would be, I think, really foolhardy to rush in and destroy an asset like that and deprive all future community members of the potential benefits that might arise from a proper investigation, a thorough analysis of what those caves can tell us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tim, and thanks everyone for showing an interest in this really important issue. I'm going to be talking to you tonight more about the importance of the Lachlan River system itself. So here we are here, this is the Lachlan River here, and the Belubula is just this tiny little blip up here. It's all part of a very important, the biggest river basin in Australia that there's been a lot of work done on to restore its health. So the plan that's been developed and was passed in 2012 aimed to restore the river and wetland health by actually returning water to the environment. So there's a significant number of wetlands and important features in the basin, and there's been quite substantial public investment allocated to this outcome. And one of the key causes of the decline in the basin health has been the construction of large storages and the over-extraction of water. So we know that large storages cause major changes to river systems. Some of these things include a barrier to the fish passage and species movement. Now, there's a requirement these days to do something about that. Building fish ladders or putting in lifts is a very expensive part of a new dam. Cold water pollution is another key environmental problem, and putting in variable offtake so that warmer water can be released into the river is also a very expensive part of a new dam construction. And then we've got other issues like deoxygenation, toxic algal blooms, and the change in the flow variability. The natural way that the river runs is changed forever once you build a dam on it. So this is what the Lachlan River catchment looks like. It's very complicated, has quite a few dams on it, quite a few weirs and impacted systems already. And as I said, the Belubula, if I can get the curse back, here's the Belubula here. It's already got a Carcoar dam on it and a number of other smaller storages in the catchment. So the issue with the basin plan is that the Lachlan system was identified already to be over-allocated, And there's been a significant amount of state and federal money invested in buying back water licences for the benefit of the environment. So the Commonwealth Government has purchased a significant amount of water to go back to the environment, but a new dam will actually cancel out this benefit. So just quickly, some of the key aspects of the Lachlan catchments right down the bottom in the floodplain is there are a number of really important wetland systems. So this is the Booligal Swamp, which is a great place for colonial bird nesting, bird breeding. The floodplain down there is significant. The Kumbung Swamp further down the river. And there's been some significant impacts on these systems already because of the water that's being extracted out of the river further upstream. So the Belubula river system itself, small river, bit of a dam on it. The Needles Gap Dam proposal's around about here, and the new two options are around about this section here. So that's where the plans are. Small river, this is the type of country that's likely to be flooded. This is what it looked like after rain. We had quite big rainfall from 2010, 2012, rain in 2014. This is actually at the Needle Gaps site. This is what it looked like in the middle of the drought. So this was at one of the big tributaries. So this is what the river looked like, absolutely no flow in it whatsoever. And I'm just showing you, this gives you the relationship of the Cadia gold mine and the size of their tailings dams in relation to the river. So this is the gold mine, this is the amount of water storage they've got, this is where the river is. So again, we've got the possibility of Needles Gap Dam, and we've got the possibility of the Cranky Rock dams here. And this is the current dam that holds about 36,000 megalitres, significant amount of water storage, and the gold mine is one of the largest water users and biggest licence holders in the area. Okay, so we're actually seeing this push for new dams across Australia will definitely impact river health. We know that really the key purpose for a new storage on the Lachlan is for mining, gold mining. It's the environment and downstream water users that will be the most impacted. And the more water you catch at the top of the system, the less water is available in those really important wetlands down on the floodplains. So I'm just going to show you some pretty pics. So Lake Cargelligo is a town that's totally reliant on tourism for its economy based on the water in the lake. And then we've got the river downstream at Booligal. It's a slow floodplain river by the time it gets down into this part of the country. And then the wetlands are significant wetlands. The floodplains are really important habitat. And there's a lot of solutions that have been mentioned. As we know, dams don't create more water, and they're all empty during the millennium drought. So the idea of water security by building more dams isn't necessarily going to solve our problems. There's a whole lot of knowledge and expertise out there about more efficient use of water, and what we really need to be considering as a society, the idea of having more high water dependent industries. Is that a sensible approach for us to be going down with climate change on our doorstep? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Well, I'll probably start by saying something a little bit heretical because I have to swap my hats a bit tonight, which is a bit complicated. And that is that I'm not just talking about the caves. Cliefden Caves is a really important site for a whole range of reasons, which we'll go through now. And first we'll start off with a nice picture of helictites, because everybody knows helictites are nice at Cliefden. So the number one thing at Cliefden, and the thing of demonstrated international scientific importance are the Ordovician fossil sites. And I'll come to them in a minute. So that's the thing which is absolutely demonstrated as being of international significance. If the caves weren't there, this would be the thing. I'm sure nobody much would be here for this issue, but this truly is one of Australia's most important invertebrate fossil localities and of international significance. So that's the first point. We then have the caves, which I'll talk about different aspects of. We have the warm spring, we have the landscape and the surface cast, we have the Tufa dams, and we have the limestone discovery site. So Cliefden is a very complicated place, and it's important for a whole range of reasons to do with its non-living environment. So let's think about the fossil sites. This is something really, really special. 191 genera, 263 species, 101 unique species. So this is an enormously important locality. It's the first place in the world where there's a record of animals building themselves up above the tide level. So the big shells there, these are big brachiopods, they're about this big, they built themselves up in things like mussel banks that got above the water level. That's new, first time it's ever happened. It's one of the few sites in the world where we have both shallow and deep water fauna preserved. So we can look at what's growing, what was living in the shallow water and what was living in the deep water at the same place. There's over 62 internationally published papers being produced on this site. So there's no lack of documentation. There's also been excursions and this and that. It's in the Australian Fossil Site book that CSIRO produced, etc., etc., etc. So it is clearly of international significance. It also has links with China. And this is another one of these things that people are thinking about plate tectonics and continental drift. 460 million years ago, we shared an ocean with China. So there are beasts found living here that are only found here in China. Here's the picture there of what the fossil hill looks like. So if we think about the caves, there's a whole lot of things that are important about caves. One of them is the shape of the caves. And one of the caves at Cliefden, the one you see on the map of on the left there, is a really complicated maze cave. These are quite interesting features. They're of international scientific interest at this very moment because there's a huge argument about how they form. This one is also one of the lowest level caves at Cliefden. There's over 3 kilometres of mapped cave there. The entrance to the cave is at about 410 metres and the cave's about 24 metres deep. This means the lowest level Cranky Rock Dam, which has a top level of about 400 metres, will flood the bottom part of the cave by at least 16 metres. So the best dam will still definitely flood at least one cave and probably the lower parts of most of them. So keep that in mind. We see these very strange features, some of which are to do with still water solution, and these things we see here on the middle one is to do with water coming upwards. So some of these caves formed by water coming from the bottom up, not by the top down, which is also very interesting. Now, pretty things. We all know about pretty things, but one thing that Tim Flannery didn't mention is that stalagmites are one of the most important sources of information about climate change. By studying the isotope ratios in stalagmites, we get the best records of past climates, and it's very interesting because there was a conference about this last year, and one of the interesting things that Chinese were talking about, which we don't hear people talking about, was global drying. And they have very good evidence of global drying. So this is something we need to keep in mind. This is a blue stalactite. Now, they're in many caves. We have minerals that are quite odd that we're only just starting to find out about in the caves. Cave sediments, there are very long records of cave sediments. Here we've got one over 5 metres thick, which we're just starting to look at. So there are cave sediments in the cave. These ones have little valves in them, so they represent some sort of seasonal changes over a significant period of time. We're hoping they'll be datable. This will give us real information about the past. There are vertebrate fossils in the caves, but they haven't really been properly studied. That's why there's no pictures, but they do exist there, so that's an important thing. And there are also maybe things a bit younger, subfossils as well. The structure of the caves can tell us about the past water levels around the place. So we can actually use the caves to understand where the water levels were in the past. We have a warm spring there. Now the warm spring will go under with all the various plants. Warm springs that are coming out of bedrock rather than out of the Great Artesian Basin are very rare. There's only 3 that I know of in New South Wales, and they're all associated with caves. We know very little about these things. This will definitely go under all of the plants. We've got the surface landscape. We've got these terraces. What my student Ian is hoping to do is he's measured all the terraces. We're hoping to be able to tie the terraces in with the water levels in the caves in the past, which will give us a history. It seems that maybe the Needles naturally dammed it, sometimes in the past, possibly. So there's a very complex history of surface features, and we have dolines and solution features. Tufa dams. We've got tufa dams in one of the side creeks. These are these things here. You can see little dams built up by the water. This is the most studied ones in New South Wales, and they're used for the climate, etc. And the last thing, of course, as was mentioned before, the first discovery of limestone. So there is a lot to do there. The major issue is that while the significance of the fossil site is very well demonstrated, we need to build up our understanding of the caves. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for inviting me to speak tonight. I speak as a caver who has been associated with the Cliefden caves and the local farming families on them for nearly 40 years. When you think of Orange, to city folk, it's the land of wine and fine food. But nearby on the Belubula River, there are many beautiful caves as well, unbeknown to many outside the speleological and scientific communities. Now, why is this? Because the caves are on private land, and landowners have concerns about insurance, trespass and safety. By not promoting the caves, it is felt the caves will be better protected and conserved. Local landowners are diversifying from sheep and cattle. Many in the Belubula are now growing wine grapes. Many of you here tonight will have sampled Angelong wines. Angelong is a caving property. You may know their Taplow Maize and Fossil Hill Reds, names I would suggest with a limited future, should this dam go ahead. When Cox built the road over the mountains in 1815, the government was keen to know what lay to the west. Governor Macquarie dispatched Evans in May that year to explore, and he was the first European to come upon the limestone on the Belubula. The first recorded entry of a cave is in 1828 by Surveyor Richards. Discovery of the 2 largest caves, Main and Murder, are attributed to Christian Rittmeister, a nearby selector on Angelong. Graffiti finds corroborate this. C. Rittmeister 1887 Angelong is found in the furthermost part of Maine. His family and the Hosey sisters, unofficial guides for many years, are recorded throughout the caves. Interaction with the local wiradjuri is significant here. William Rothery notes that the Indigenous people are helpful and friendly. Barrambarangal Cave is named after a local warrior. Malongalai is a cave. Scar trees are known in the area, and Aboriginal remains have been found in one of the caves. The Wiradjuri have had a very long association with this land. The caves have been in the hand of only 2 families for nearly 2 centuries. Cavers who think Cliefden think Orange Speleological Society. The society was founded in 1955 and has caved regularly at Cliefden. Several OSS Foundation members caved there in the 20s, 30s and 40s. In 1960, we were invited by Anthony Dunhill's grandfather to manage the caves. This access control has meant that the caves are extraordinarily well catered for. I beg your pardon, cared for. All access is governed by the ASF Code of Practice, which mean minimal impact caving is practiced, and to this day access to the caves is at the discretion of the property owners in consultation with OSS. Entry to the caves is permitted to ASF clubs and to visiting researchers. So, what will be lost if a dam is built? Let me go through the list that we talked through with politicians and data gatherers. An extensive decorated cave system, including rare blue stalactites. Over 60 caves. In total, 120 karst features. One, Taplow Maze Cave, is, as the name suggests, a bewildering cave on Taplow Flat, mapped recently at 3 k's long. Another, Main Cave, the best known, has the largest single chamber in the area, 35 metres by 38 metres. A world-renowned fossil site, Fossil Hill, Trilobite Hill, and much of the highly fossiliferous Cliefden Caves limestone. A thermal spring, one of only 3 found on karst in New South Wales. Cultural heritage sites, both Indigenous and early colonial. An important scientific research site for universities, scientists and schools. More than 50 academic papers, I've learnt tonight it's over 60 now, national and international, have been published on the site. 2 current studies on bats and geomorphology are in progress. Endangered bat species and bat maternity sites. The current study suggests there might be 6 microbat species in the area. As bats eat as bats eat insects in large numbers, their removal will cause problems for vineyards. Large areas of productive river flat agricultural land will be lost. There is no net value to losing productive land upstream to irrigate land downstream. A significant area of remnant riparian vegetation, wildlife corridor and nesting sites in otherwise cleared landscape, and a number of rare and or endemic inveterate species. Australia has limited karst compared to other countries. National Parks and Wildlife Service ranks the Cliefden Caves as highly significant, with the highest number of internationally significant values for any cave area outside the National Parks estate in New South Wales. The Central West, widening from Orange, is most fortunate to have several world significant sites. We have the Wellington Caves and the Age of Fishes Museum in Canowindra, called by David Attenborough just recently one of our greatest wonders. At Cliefden, we have the Ordovician fossils and the Cliefden limestone. Destruction of these caves would be a travesty. There should be no dam anywhere on the Blubbia. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tim. Great to be here tonight and to co-sponsor to make this event happen. Excellent to see you all here tonight to come out on a Wednesday night. And I'd like to acknowledge our chairman, our chairperson, Professor Don White, is in the audience tonight. Thanks for coming along, Don. As I said, or as Tim said in the introduction, the Nature Conservation Council has been around for 60 years this year and has a strong history of opposing dams in the landscape where they simply don't make sense and will heavily impact on our environment. And are particularly concerned about this proposal because, one, the impact on the caves, but also the message that it sends for communities who live in regional areas that we'll just build another dam and that will fix our water issues. We've heard from people such as Bev tonight that that's a little bit of a simplification of the complex issues when it comes to water management. And it really is time that our New South Wales politicians move beyond the let's just build a dam when it comes around to election time. And for once and for all, we knocked big, massive scale dams off the political radar in New South Wales. Koala, bit of a strange image you might think. I was going to talk about the state of nature in New South Wales and put dams and this proposal into a little bit of context. But instead, I won't do that. I'll talk about what the state of play is for this dam proposal in New South Wales at the moment. We've also seen the ALP, Luke Foley, come out on this issue as well since he's been elected as leader of the opposition. And what we've seen is a pretty strong stance from Labor that they will not support any dams that are going to impact on the caves. Again, that's a huge sign of the community concern for this, and the fact that both the opposition and the government are getting shaky on this issue. We've also seen from the ALP that they will list the Cliefden Caves, or put them onto the heritage list. That's a fantastic move, certainly is long overdue and would be very welcome. And one of our other major parties, of course the Greens, also have a very strong policy when it comes to dams. Pretty simple one, no dams. So the Greens, of course, don't support any dams in New South Wales. We've heard how bad this dam proposal is for a whole range of different reasons tonight. However, we probably all know in this audience, if we've been involved in other campaigns, in other issues in our areas, that bad ideas don't simply fall by themselves. Bad ideas get up each and every day in policy, and what it takes to overcome those bad ideas is sound science, which we clearly have in this case, but of course also a lot of concern. We need our MPs to see that people are not only concerned, but that they're active, and that we will speak out, we will tell our friends, we will get involved to make sure that our political leaders, our MPs across the state, know people don't want this dam to be built. So there are many things that we can do to put this issue on the agenda for our politicians. I think it's pretty clear that it's up there when we see the leader of the opposition speaking out about it. We see the government already softening some of their language around it. But what it's really going to take, if we're going to knock this dam on the head, we're going to need to see more people signing the petition online and communicating with their MP that they don't want this dam built. So please, if you haven't signed it already, please go on to savecliefdencaves.org.au and sign the petition. It may not seem like much, but certainly all of our signatures and all of our names add up together to make a huge impact on our MPs. Of course, if you've already done that and wondering, all right, well, what can I do next? Calling your MP or writing a letter to the Premier are hugely powerful actions. I often hear that people are feeling like, oh, we live in such an apathetic society, and whilst I agree, I also think that gives us a great power. Those of us who are involved in causes such as this can have a really huge impact, because our MPs aren't hearing from that many constituents. Our Premier isn't getting that many phone calls because people are busy with their lives. So if each one of us tomorrow picked up the phone and called the Premier, I have absolutely no doubt that would get on his radar. So if you're looking, you've got a spare couple of minutes tomorrow, you can quickly Google his number, doesn't take long, and your message will be duly noted. Writing letters to the editor of local papers or statewide papers as well. The Sydney Morning Herald has run stories on the Cliefden Caves. Makes a huge impact. Even if your letter doesn't get published, the editor knows, oh, okay, this issue, we're hearing some feedback from our readers on this issue, so maybe we'll consider running another story later on. So don't feel disheartened if you don't see your letter in. Maybe you helped somebody else's letter get over the line. Now is a crucial time. We've got, 3.5 weeks left until the election. There's never a better time to get our political leaders' attention than now. Meeting with your candidates is incredibly powerful. Candidates certainly have a lot of attention to focus on people such as yourself and I at this stage in the campaign, so please do reach out to them. Of course, tell your friends, family and neighbours. There's no better messenger to tell a new person about an issue of concern than a friend, a family member or a neighbour, so please do take up that challenge. But what we can do tonight is send a clear message to our politicians that all of us in the room right here in Sydney care about the Cliefden Caves, something that for many of our politicians probably feels like a very long way away. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to put your hands out and thumbs up if you think the dam should go ahead, thumbs down if you don't think the dam should go ahead. We're going to get some fantastic photos tonight to show to our political leaders tomorrow morning that we don't want this dam built in New South Wales, and it won't be built in New South Wales. And smile for the camera. Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
I just want to put a little plug in for something very important to keep this campaign rolling, keep this information going. We rely completely on donations from the public, and all the funds we raise go back into activities like this and building the campaign, signing up more people, getting more information around. And for us to be able to work with researchers like Armstrong to build a stronger case against the dams and for the protection of the Cliefden Caves. And we couldn't have got where we've got to without those donations, so we really kicked off in October, and we've been able to recruit the people we have and have these events, particularly this event tonight, based on donations we've received. So we'll start over here.
Is the asset list that both the Celluloid Society and Professor Elizabeth mentioned on the Facebook page so that we've got to all the points of the letter writing?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I certainly know there's a lot of information on the Save Cliefden Caves website. I'm not sure if that all of it makes it onto the Facebook page, but certainly if you check out their website, there's a lot of detailed information, absolutely.
We know in New South Wales that sometimes political decisions are not based on science. Sometimes they're based on ownership of land or ownership of economic concerns. Does anyone know that what is behind the drive to build this town in terms of economic factors?
Gold mines, mainly. So there's about 3 or 4 proposals for gold mines in that central west area. And the Cadia mine that I showed you, during the drought, it had to trawl for a very wide area, buying up groundwater licences. It already gets the effluent from Orange City. It was looking at Bathurst, so that was one mine. You put another 3 or 4 mines of a similar size in that landscape, the water's just not there. So the spin at the moment is town water supply security, security for irrigation, but the underlying issue is, trying to demonstrate that there will be a water supply for any new mines in that area.
Would I be right in understanding that we're taking a gigalitre out upstream, we're going to take a gigalitre of water out all the way downstream, all the way to South Australia? Does that make this a matter of potential interest to federal water resources organisations? Secondly, how many of these mines will have tailing dams upstream of the proposed dams? And would I be right in understanding that tailing dams are there to prevent heavy metals entering the waterways downstreams, but that there is international precedence of tailing dams failing?
That's right. But I think one related issue was, it was said back in the 1970s when the dam was abandoned that the reason it was abandoned was that the water was not of international standard for heavy metals, because the 1970s plan was to use the dam for the proposed city of Victoria, which never happened. And that was the understanding I had at the time, was that the water just then wasn't up to standard. There's so many mines in the upper reaches, there has to be lots of heavy metals, etc. down there.
Right, so the only useful purpose of water would be the mine.
Yes.
When you read the New South Wales Water Report, it does percentages on what they think the water will be used for. For water for urban use, it's 2 to 3%. 2 to 3% of 100%, I think. When you do manufacturing is 6%, but when it talks about mining is 18 point something %. Now, when I first read the report, I assumed that the Cadia mine, plus these 3 new mines which might possibly start, would equal the 18%. But I've since been informed that Cadia already sources its water and won't be counted in this. So what we've got is we've got 2 dams that they want to start. Our federal member suggests it's jobs that he's looking for. He suggested a 49-metre wall for a dam that will hold 90 megalitres of water. We've just found out that he's talking 102 metres of dam wall with 700,000 megalitres of water. So the first dam has pulled out, the first mine has pulled out from West Australia because the price of gold has gone down. There is no water in the system, that you can't make water. They've taken water for Cadia out of the Macquarie system. So where the water is going to come from, I don't know. But I've got a pretty good idea where it's going to go.
Up the back, here, yeah.
2 questions. How do the owners feel about this dam? And, I mean, obviously, some of their property is going to become lakefront property. I mean, some people think that's a good thing. And secondly, if these dams weren't to go ahead, does the New South Wales Water have a plan B to supply water for their upcoming mining ventures?
Anyone know about a plan B?
I think, look, it's pretty clear that the landowners are not the affected landowners are not in favour. One of the problems, however, is I don't think they appreciate the amount of land that is likely to be resumed as a buffer zone around the reservoir. So people are thinking, oh, I'll just lose the paddock that's flooded, not realising that there'll be then a buffer zone also taken. So the actual effect on the affected property owners is going to be far more than just where the water stops.
On Angalong property that makes those wines, they're on top of the hills. Taplow Flat down the bottom, they have 3 families that run with cattle there, but if that gets flooded, I guess that the farm is no longer viable as a cattle place there. Anthony thinks, when we talk to him, that he's not convinced it will go ahead. He thinks that the problems with the geology will be too hard. That when we spoke to Mr Cobb just shrugs his shoulders and says, well, you know, science can fix these things. Which yeah, science can fix these things.
Sure. Question up here, yeah.
I'm not terribly familiar with it, but I understand that water runs through like that. Time, water is through. If this valley is dammed, how much of the water will actually leak away through the cave system? Is that likely to happen, or is it just going to flood when we sit there?
It's very hard to predict. There isn't any clear reason at the moment to think that's going to be the major problem. The major problem is that the Needles Dam site, which has been rejected about 4 times, and in fact in recent years our knowledge of the geology says the geology is worse than people thought it was 40 years ago, because there's a very large fault there, and all of these dam proposals will pond water above this major fault, and it is possible that it could lubricate the fault and allow it to move. Well, you might have, certainly the Needles Dam has been rejected many times in the past because the geology looks good on the surface, but the strong rock actually stops at the water level, and the rock the dam would be built on is really quite weak. But in the most recent geological mapping of the area has identified a very large thrust fault running along the Needles, and so that's additional reason why that's not a good site, but also damming on top of it may not be a smart idea either.
I think that's issue 2, Cranky Rock as well.
I'm not as aware of the Cranky Rock sites have their own problems too, yeah. There was a lot of work done on this a very long time ago, and the Needles was considered the worst possible site to be avoided at all costs. So it's sort of interesting that it came up as being the site that people wanted.
Question in the middle here. And we've got one.
If the water spring gets flooded by substantial amount of dam water, what if it comes up backwards and runs down the hilltop fault line? The spring will leak.
Well, it's not, I mean, our knowledge of the hydrology of that area is extremely poor. That's one of the real things. It's not well understood at all. In fact, none's been done in reality.
Over here.
Well, that's happening at this very moment. This is with there's a program of cave mapping going ahead at the moment, and there's people here who are involved in it probably. So that map I showed of the Maze Cave, that's really quite a new map, and that does have depth there. And no. There's been no government money come to anybody to do any research there. The research being done there at the moment is either funded out of people's own pockets, and some of it's being funded by the Australian Speleological Federation, and we're hoping that some money will come from the Save Cliefden Caves Association to support research. But no, there has been no public funding. And of course, this is why we know so much less about the caves than we do about the fossils, because in the past there were people who were employed to study fossils. People have never been employed to study caves. That's the real reason why there's a difference in our knowledge.
We've got, I think, a question up the back and then another one here and a comment over here. Did you want to ask a question, mate? Yep. Speak up.
In 2009, the government turned off the Lachlan River at Condobolin. So anyone living below Condobolin had absolutely no water. That's what happened. So the whole business of sharing water is really challenged when you've got big industries like mining companies in the top of the catchment, and you've got floodplain graziers and cattle growers down the bottom of the catchment. So it really was not a fair outcome at all, and we wouldn't like to see that continuing to happen. And because the Lachlan is so over-allocated, there's just not the room for any more big water users in that catchment.
Great question. You're the sort of bloke that catches politicians out, I can tell, when they visit schools. Over here. I'm getting mixed messages. There's sort of some of the irrigators think that it might be a good idea, but the other issue is that there are no new water licences available, so any water use out of that dam has to be purchased off somebody else. And the business of water trading to the highest value user is the mining industry, and we've seen that happen in the Hunter. The dairy industry's virtually been wiped out because mining companies will pay up to $4,000 a megalitre. If you're growing lucerne to produce milk, you can't compete with trading in at that price. And it's actually, when you look at the economic considerations, dairy farmers have just sold their entire water licence portfolio to the mining industry and gone on holidays for the rest of their life. So, but that's been a real issue for the loss of a really important food-producing industry because the water's all gone to the mines. So, and if I could just say one other thing, we've actually won a big campaign against a dam in New South Wales, and it was 4 years ago, and it was on the Williams River, which is a tributary of the Hunter, and that was the Tilligra Dam. We had a 4-year campaign between 2 elections, and the previous government announced just prior to the last election that the dam wasn't going to go ahead. So, that might be the period of time it takes, but I'm just saying you can win a campaign against a dam, and we've had a success doing that just recently. one question here and one down here.
Just one comment. The current thinking from the federal government is that whilst they're prepared to put in some sort of seeding money, their idea is that dams are going to be built by private enterprise. And Barnaby Joyce has already had meetings with the financiers and the construction companies on building dams. So what the idea is that not only the dams will be privately owned, but the water in it will be privately owned. And that's something that the people in sort of the orange area are not aware of yet. And it's in his, the white paper, which was called Agricultural Competitiveness, strange name. So that's the big problem that's looming, and that's the big difference to the whole proposal from the 1970s, where they were just trying to provide water for a new city. So
It specifically mentioned dams on the Columbia River in that report.
that's right, yeah.
Okay, so Tony Jones would say, take that as a comment. Down here.
Maybe we need to think big and also learn from other places. Because I just recently heard that in America, the Flathead River flows through Montana and into Canada. They've made the whole water catchment a mine-free zone. They're not allowed to mine in the watershed of the Flathead River anymore. Now, I don't know how they've done that, but it's worth finding out. And also the state of Vermont in America has made a water into a trust, not just for humans, but for the land itself and the plants and the animals and the whole of the environment. It's a trust that can't be mined and it can't be bought and sold. So I mean there are legislative precedents for this sort of thing, and I think we might as well start thinking big about it.
Did anyone on the panel want to comment on the comment at all? Yeah, Beth?
Unfortunately, Australia's gone down the road. We have the most privatised ownership of water in the world. So we've gone a long way down the track again. So it's a big turning around of the Titanic to achieve that.
Can you talk about the...
Yes, it is discussed all the time. It's a very sensitive area. The scar trees, for example, which are on certain aspects of the river, are not advertised at all. The remains of the Aboriginal person was found in the late 80s by one of the Speleo clubs, and the Indigenous people came there. I think the police were originally involved as well, but the Indigenous people came there. It's not actually a burial site. The paper that was written from it suggests that it was an Indigenous person who'd been in the area and somehow got into the hole.
Yeah. So certainly there are plans to have further discussions with the local land council and also to talk to the New South Wales Land Council as well, but starting with the local land council. Yes, Ian.
It's the whole area here is really fraught, but I guess the bottom line, when you read the document, everything comes down to cost-benefit analyses. If it can't present a case where it's worth, where everything in nature is worth money, then they're not much bothered with it. Now, it might just fall apart by cost. The original costing by John Cobb was $150 million, and they'd put some, maybe $1 million or $2 million in to start it, to have a look. In the latest report, the Bargain Dam, which is raising Wyangla Dam wall 20 metres, is going to cost well over $500 million. The Cranky Rock dams are in the $600 and $700 million. They've done a few fanciful ones further down the valley. There's one ripper I can't quite remember, which is $1.9 billion. So if you're going to water grass down at Canowindra, it's going to be fairly good grass by the time it gets the water on it. So there is a lot of money involved in this. If they don't sell the poles and wires next week, there's going to be, I don't think the money can be raised for this. And with those numbers that are given, the water report talks about what is counted and what is not counted. In it they count a 10% profit for the construction company. They count roads that will need to be built to come in, land that will need to be resumed. And then they've got half a page of things that haven't quite costed in yet. So I think if 150 million has become somewhere between 500 and 700 million, and half it hasn't been counted yet, it'll be $1 billion. So we as New South Wales taxpayers here are going to have to pay our taxes.
All right, that might wrap it up. So I'd like to firstly thank all of our panellists tonight for coming along, giving their time and speaking. Thanks also to Unions New South Wales, the Metalworkers Union, Jan Primrose, who came tonight to make sure that we had access to this excellent venue. So thank you for your support and for providing the venue to us. That's been a big help. And particularly thank you to everyone here who's turned out midweek in the middle of a working week to come and hear this. It's really, really great that we had such a terrific turnout. We would like you to please, as we said, consider a donation. Michael will be over on the way out picking up forms. Please, we can't do events like this, which we'll need more of without that support. Please visit our website, Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, get active, get involved. And we'll see you on the campaign trail. Thank you.